Let's now move to protecting the endothelium, the lining of the artery of the heart. It is so important, the lining of all the arteries is so important to keep that protected. And it can be fragile. And this is part of where the genetic component I explain to patients comes in with heart disease. You say, oh, heart disease is genetic in my family, right? Well, it's like, well, some people are born with their endothelium simply being more fragile than other people, right? Some people could smoke cigarettes like crazy and they don't clog their arteries too much. Other people, just a little bit, boom, they're causing inflammation and damage to their endothelium. And so there's many different genetic factors that really play a role there. But if you took excellent care of your endothelium, even if you have that genetically fragile endothelium, you still can prevent the heart disease from developing. You can prevent those events from happening. So in regards to the endothelium and the plaque buildup process, it's an inflammatory process, inflammation. Look at the word, inflammation. What is it? Inflame, right? So basically your arteries are on fire. So here's the analogy I really like to think about it. You would never want to do anything to pour gas on the fire. Why would you fuel the flame and make the inflammation worse? So what kind of things do that? Of course, animal products, specially processed meats and the higher fat animal products, oils, technically of any kind. You can make arguments that some are less harmful than others for sure, but they're highly processed. Refined carbohydrate, sugar, white flour. The caffeine thing goes back and forth. I know Caldwell Esselstyn really thinks caffeine can impair endothelial function based on brachial artery tourniquet tests and such, saturated fats, and of course, tobacco and smoke. That's what pours fuel, pours gas on the flame. You don't want that. So what is it that pours water on the flame? What can help put out the inflammation? Of course, unprocessed plant-based foods. You knew I was going to say that, didn't you? So fruits and vegetables, beans and lentils, whole grains, herbs and spices, more than 100,000 edible species, probably 200,000 edible species of unprocessed plant-based foods. So what do? Do we just keep eating more of these unprocessed plant-based foods and trying to pour more water on the fire as gas is also being poured on the fire? No, just like we said, remove the thing that's causing the harm, right? Remove the thing that's causing the harm. And then what's going to happen? Now you're only pouring water on the flame and the fire gets put out. You know, how simple is that? That is the concept of lifestyle medicine. And it works, which I'll show you some of the clinical trials. But to damage that endothelium, it really only takes one meal. We know this. This is a picture from the Game Changers documentary where they had them, they had some people, some athletes, I believe it was Miami Dolphins wide receivers, eat a meal, and the one guy eats an avocado bean burrito, and the other person, it's like a organic grass-fed chicken burrito. I don't know exactly what it was, something like that. And they drew the blood and they just looked at it. On the left side, a lower fat plant-based meal with healthy fats. It wasn't even that low fat. It had healthy fats that were plant-based in it. The blood is nice and clear versus the high fat is nice and not nice. It's horribly and cloudy. And that circulates throughout the body after breakfast, lunch, and dinner, causes endothelial injury, makes the cholesterol numbers go up. And that is just not good. Even one meal. So you can imagine what decades of meals like that would do. So it's a cholesterol, lower that down, and it's endothelial health. So I like to emphasize something that Dr. Michael Greger also puts in his initial talk, How Not to Die, and that is simply this statement, that heart disease is not the cause of death. Wait, I just lied to you, didn't I? Because I told you earlier, heart disease is the number one killer in America, right? Well, you know what? I guess I did lie to you, because the number one cause of death in the United States is the American diet, right? Dietary risks. This is the burden of disease study that really has tried to show what can we do, what can we impact in order to end up lowering risk. It's dietary. Dietary factors are the number one thing. Tobacco is number two. So why is it that we really haven't done anything? Why haven't doctors done this? And again, it just blows my mind away that we haven't made enough changes. And then the analogy that Dr. Greger likes to use and other people as well is so powerful. When we really think back to the 50s and 60s, we think of how doctors used to smoke. You go to medical conferences, it would be a haze of smoke. Pregnant people used to smoke, and it was just all over the place. And it's crazy, horrible how this was promoted. There was science that showed it was okay. Nowadays, it is not the tobacco, it's the food, right? But I go to a journal club when I was training, and what do they buy us? Pepperoni pizza, soda pop, and potato chips. That's what the cardiology trainees are eating as they're discussing research journals. And now I go to other conferences, and it's still, there's red meat all over the place. There is so many animal-based foods and even processed foods. Now it's the food is the problem. And the food industry has done the same thing the tobacco industry did back then in regards to brainwashing us, funding studies, making things confusing, trying to keep it as a part of our culture. And the sad state of our health is really this, that 63% of calories come from sugar, white flour, and added fats, the added oils. That processed food categories, remember when I had those 3 food categories in the upper left was processed foods? That's 63% of the calories in America. And then the upper right corner was the animal-based foods. That is 25% of what Americans eat. And Americans, according to the USDA, only eat 12% of their calories from unprocessed plant-based foods. And half of that is potatoes from French fries and tomatoes from ketchup. That's horrible, horrible. So what we really need to do is eliminate that yellow part completely. Knock that red part down to as close to zero as you could possibly get it. And then, of course, that should be a predominantly green pie graph. And so the concept that I really emphasize in all of my lectures and when I'm talking to patients is the simple percentage of calories that you get from unprocessed plant-based foods, which is what exactly this pie chart shows. You need it to be at least 90% to be healthy. But of course, we really want it to be 100% if we can. So when people are extremely resistant to the whole 100% mindset, I tell people a Mediterranean diet is historically at 90% at least. The DASH diet is 90%. They're all plant-based diets. It's just they're not quite 100%. So if they're really resistant, then I'll say, fine, get on the Mediterranean diet, make sure you're 90% whole food plant-based. Then we'll work on that other 10% as you go. And we get there. But anytime, anything that a patient can do to increase the green part of this pie graph is going to make them healthier. And it's important that this is probably the most important concept that I discuss with my patients. So on the left is a USDA plate with 3 servings of low-fat dairy. And they say fruits and vegetables should be half. That's great. Grains, they don't specify whole grains. They don't say it all has to be whole grains, which is just bonkers. And they say protein. Well, protein is not a food, right? Protein is a macronutrient. We need to really say that it should be legumes, beans and lentils, other plant-based protein sources. So on the right is what PCRM really advocates, that type of plate where you're drinking water. Canada's food guide, markedly better. It does have half fruits and vegetables, and it says to emphasize plant proteins more often than animal proteins. It's not perfect. As you see, there's eggs and salmon on there, but it is much better. And so when I tell people how messed up the USDA dietary guidelines are, I point them towards Canada's dietary guidelines where dairy has been removed as a food group, and it's 90% or more plant-based. So to emphasize, eat the whole food, eat the orange, not the orange juice, eat the olive, not the olive oil, and don't worry about the whole protein thing. You're going to be fine as long as you're eating adequate calories of unprocessed plant-based foods. You're going to blow protein away. Just make sure you're eating a variety of foods. Don't eat only bananas. If you eat only bananas, 20 bananas a day, okay, fine, you'll get 2,000 calories, but you only get 20 grams of protein. Not enough. I get it. Make it a variety, right? And whenever somebody argues about this can't be right, what about protein? What about this? What about that mineral? Well, just say, hey, listen. The American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has a statement, and they say that a 100% plant-based diet, as long as it's well-balanced, again, is nutritionally adequate for all stages of life, including childhood, infancy, pregnancy, adolescence, elderly people. My wife had two babies conceived and born, 100% plant-based. We have 6 plant-based children. They are thriving, athletic, strong, growing great, and very smart. They have no problems whatsoever. So this statement just knocks out anybody's doubt that you can't get this or you can't get that or whatever. It is nutritionally adequate. And of course, you could ask all these plant-based athletes, and you've probably seen The Game Changers, which I refer all my patients to. Phenomenal documentary.